I'm Keith Klein, the founder of VentureFizz. We are a website that's focused on the tech industry, helping you with your career, jobs, events, keeping current on what's going on in the tech industry. So you go to our site, there's lots of great information there. If you're not familiar with us, definitely check it out. There's like 1,800 jobs. I'll put a link to our email newsletter that I highly recommend you sign up for. It's curated by me. I've been doing it for like 15 years. So I highly recommend that. But we've been doing this AI career level up series over the past 5 weeks. So it's been 5 events. Today is the fifth and final event. It's been so amazing as far as all the different pieces of advice and tips. So much deep information from all of our speakers. So I've been really grateful for everybody's time, and I hope everybody's been getting a lot out of it. So the past events have been largely focused around the job search, like leveraging AI, personal branding, interviewing, that type of stuff. But today is very different. Today, if you think about every job function is being disrupted by AI, some more than others. So today we're going to talk about how do you future-proof your career? So upskilling and adopting for AI's evolution. So 3 housekeeping notes before we get into our panel here. Aura has been our sponsor for this event series. Thank you, Aura. They have been a fantastic partner. I'm going to put a link in the chat to check out their jobs. Yes, they are hiring. I'll put a link for our new email newsletter. And the chat feature has been awesome. So the more conversation, questions, like there's a Q&A button, but I don't know. Like I like to have the questions in the chat. It just, keeps the conversation going. It's good to have banter. So I encourage you all to pipe in and leverage information in the chat. All right, Amy Parker is moderating our event, so I'm going to hand things over to her. So Amy, thank you for doing this. I will let you take it from here.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm very excited for this opportunity to kind of moderate this panel on AI and upskilling your career. I've been in the workforce for a few decades, and I feel like every year something else comes out that's going to change the whole landscape of being able to not only get a job, but to make sure that your progress continuously moves forward. So we've got a great panel of very AI native companies and people. And we'll do round robin introductions. First, Taylor, you were first on the call. So my question is, who are you? Where are you coming from? And what are you personally thinking about as far as the impact of AI on your particular career?
Yeah, so as you said, I'm Taylor. I'm currently head of talent, people and talent at January. We're a Series B fintech working to make consumer finance work better for borrowers and lenders alike. We're a team that's diving headfirst into using AI in every way that we can. And we're hiring, shameless plug. Um, but obviously, there's so much to think about in terms of how we think about AI impacting our careers. And I think it may sound like a little bit of a trope, but it kind of sounds like, when the typewriter is invented or something like that, that just dramatically changes how we work, but even faster. And I think some people may be more pessimistic about what that means, and some may be more on the optimistic side of the spectrum. And if you're pessimistic, maybe you're somebody who's contributing to the rise in blue collar work, which is great. But I'm going to assume everyone tuning into this webinar is more of the optimist. And I think in terms of the case of optimism, I see tons of opportunity for work to actually become more human when AI can do a lot of the more menial, mundane tasks that we're doing. It's time to really think about like, what do I bring, and what value can I add as a human being in a workplace of other humans, and really lean into that work, which I think tends to be more meaningful. So I tend to get really excited as a head of people. I kind of see room to build leaner and more efficient teams. And after kind of the whipsaw of overhiring and overcorrecting, I actually take that as a positive. And so I tend to be pretty excited about what that means for the future of building teams.
Yeah, great. Thank you. How about you, Sean?
Yeah, I'm thrilled to be here and excited to have this conversation today. I'm Sean Lindsay. My formal role is Senior VP of Engineering at LinkSquares. I also run a leadership training and development business, so I coach a lot of rising leaders and junior executives. And in today's marketplace, that's an interesting position folks find themselves in. In addition to the fact that at LinkSquares we are building AI native vertical SaaS tools to help corporate legal teams extract intelligence out of their corpus of documents and agreements. And within my day job, spend, hours every day working closely with teams to think about new and innovative ways to leverage emerging AI technologies to improve our end user experience, but also increasingly looking at ways that we can leverage tools internal to our own process that will help our teams be more efficient, more effective, focus on where they're adding real value, automate away some of the more mundane rote parts of their job. And I'd be remiss if I didn't mention I also happen to be the parent to two high schoolers. So our family is in the headspace of what does the future of work look like? What should I go study in college? How should I think about what careers have high potential going forward? And so I also bring that perspective of not only thinking about my own career impact, but sort of thinking about where the larger market is going. And super, super excited to be a part of the discussion today.
Yeah, you have a double learning background as well as
Mhm.
engineering, so we'll dig into that.
Yeah.
That's going to be really exciting. I'll turn the same question over to you, Bryan.
Yeah, thanks for having me, everyone. And Sean, I have a 1-year-old, so I'm gonna let the AI stuff play out for the next 15, 20 years, and then I'll worry about it later. Um, but hey, everyone, I'm Bryan Menduke. I run the recruiting team at Kensho. For those of you who do not know Kensho, we are about 150 person company now in Harvard Square. We are actually a subsidiary of S&P Global, which I think gives us a really unique perspective on some of how AI is changing. We operate as S&P Global's AI innovation hub for AI innovation and transformation. So we do everything within machine learning, NLP, and data discovery, deploying different solutions across their entire enterprise and their customers worldwide. So that can be financial generative AI applications, agents, data retrieval APIs, data extraction, et cetera. We run the whole gamut at S&P, and really unique to be part of a company where we have to be really AI focused and really focus on like what's next, what's the next thing that we're going to need to be working on to transform a 40,000 person enterprise that hasn't necessarily been known historically as like a technology first company, and how do we actually make that company more technology first and for them and their customers moving forward as they try to gear up against all these startups in their space. And for myself, leading talent acquisition, really thinking about, when I post a job now, how do we deal with, having 1,500 applicants because people, use AI to apply into jobs now? How do we sort through those resumes? How do we make sure the recruiting experience, despite becoming more efficient in a way of being able to look at resumes or apply into a job, how do we make sure that that connection still stays human? Because ultimately, at the end of the day, recruiting is still ultimately about that human connection.
Yeah, I think that's on the top of mind about every job seeker here, in terms of like, how is my resume going to be treated once it gets into the system? And so I think we've heard from other talent acquisition professionals that human connection still outweighs any resume that you can put in, and making those network connections is really critical. So I'll pass it over to you, Ryan. And I promise I won't do Ryan and Bryan in the same order so I don't mix up your names again.
Thanks, Amy. Thanks, Keith, for having me. My name is Ryan Durkin. I lead the AI at Work team at Whoop. We are a health wearable. We are downtown Boston, right next to Fenway Park. Also hiring as well. Been around for about 12, 13 years, and have a mission to unlock health span and human performance. So really focused on helping everyone just capture the best part of their years of their life. When I think about future proofing and kind of where my focus is around AI, it's really on up-leveling every employee here. So it was a department that was created by me that was meant to be kind of centralized at first and then decentralized 12 months later. So I look at this as more of a project than a full-time role. And we're in month 8. We got 4 months to go. And my hope after the next 4 months is that we'll have distributed all of our AI efforts across every single team at the department, at the company throughout departments. So I first created just to kind of get the ball rolling and get tools unlocked and get people using tools and becoming experts in tools and ramping up L&D efforts and, baking AI into the employee life cycle and hiring for it and onboarding, blah, 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 blah. But the goal over time is to put the power back into everyone else's hands here. And longer term, I just want to help everyone in Boston win with AI. I think we have a huge opportunity as a city to get everyone's skill set leveled up here and try to dominate the East Coast. So that's what I'm all about.
And what I've noticed is a trend twofold. Number one, there's a trend in terms of how can I, as an individual, upskill? And then now, what are companies doing to help their employees upskill? So any questions that you guys have, please use the chat to put those kinds of questions in. But we'll dig into kind of that idea. We talked about optimism, pessimism. Other than that, in terms of that, what do you think the biggest mind shift is? And I'll just leave this open for anybody that wants to chime in. What's the biggest mindset shift professionals need to adapt to really come out strong in the world of AI?
I can take it. What I talk about to the team here a lot is two things. One is this concept of your tool belt. And I think if you were to think about a marketer, for example, like a great CMO is great at consumer acquisition, they're great at retention and lifecycle marketing, they're great at product marketing, they're good at brand. They've got their kind of tool belt of domains they have to get really good at. And internally, I'm pushing the team to really think about that at the tool level. And how can you become a domain expert in those tools? So for product, it might be, okay, you've got, yes, ChatGPT to help you with PRDs and all of that, but becoming a beast with whether it's Cursor or Replit to get your prototyping skills up to snuff, N8N on the automation side, really just starting to think about like, what is my hammer? What is my screwdriver? What is my tape measure? And how do I complete this kind of tool belt? And I think that helps people because my point to them is like, don't try to boil the ocean all at once. Just pick one tool to get really good at to start with. So anytime internally we talk about that. The second thing we talk about is expanding the moat. And so like in the world of everyone potentially fearing for their jobs, my point to everyone internally here is like, guys, we've got Whoops on several 100,000 people in the world, and there's 7 billion people out there. We have to win by expanding the moat. We have to win by eventually launching a Whoop for families and kids, or Whoop for private practice, Whoop for coaches, Whoop for teams. And all of these to me represent opportunities where we can start startups within the startup. And so before anyone gets scared about my job, it's like become a beast in your domain and then just really think about how can I expand the moat? How can I launch a new startup or an opportunity within your existing company? That's kind of my 2 points I'd lead off with.
I love the idea of changing your moat, and I think that is a great question for Sean, who's running his own leadership development, in terms of what are those skills and what are those, how do you help people build their own roadmap in terms of what do I need to learn? How do I learn it? Do I need a portfolio? I hear people talking about building their own AI agents. Should I be doing it? You know,
Yeah.
those questions about really thinking about any upskilling plan, whether it's at the company level for employees or individuals, starts with a plan. Where do we start?
Well, let me maybe even wind the tape back even a little bit further, but I'll hopefully land there for you. Taylor said something during his intro, which mirrors what I have heard myself repeating in a lot of conversations, which is understanding we probably have a fairly diverse audience here today, though probably mostly knowledge workers, but lots of different functions and lots of different kind of levels of exposure so far with AI technologies. I'm finding that there's a bit of a barbell distribution. There are, as I think Taylor put it, pessimists and optimists. But what I find is there are people who are jumping in with both feet and just figuring it out as they go, and people who are standing on the sidelines waiting. And so the first bit of advice I've given everybody who I talk to, everybody on my teams, and by the way, I have this distribution within my own org of, however many engineers. I've got folks who are skeptics, who are kind of leaning back, and folks who have jumped right in and are using tools sometimes at the screaming edges of what our security and legal compliance would allow. And I've got to rein that in. But what I've talked a lot about internally specifically, but I think this applies to any working professionals right now. First thing is you have to recognize that there is a significant shift happening. Looks like I have the most gray hair in this entire panel. I've seen many cycles of this sort of hype explosion of big new exciting things. But I am firmly in the camp that this is a seismic shift on at least the order of mobile as an analog that we can point to. The internet being an older one that maybe I'm the only one who was old enough to experience as a working professional coming up. Um, but the idea being when these big shifts happen, there is sometimes a tendency, whether it's out of pessimism or out of fear or out of just lack of awareness, to hang back and say, let me wait till the dust settles and kind of figure out where I need to go. And as someone who's lived through several of these cycles, my first word of advice is to counter those feelings and jump into the mess. And there's lots of overhype and there's lots of false promises and there's lots of things that don't work. But the key here, and the phrase I use internally at LinkSquares, is every single person in our organization needs to build basic AI fluency. You need to be conversant. You need to understand, what is a context window and why does that matter to me? I need to understand, what does it mean if I have agent to agent interactions with no human in the loop that are just sort of operating on their own? How do I build the right safeguards into our business practices to account for these things? How do I think about the fundamental shift every time a new large model is released or a new technology comes out? How do I avoid the whiplash of chasing every shiny object that comes out? And I think a lot of that comes with just basic fluency. So to make some concrete suggestions, Amy, to your question, there are great Reddit communities. There are great Substacks. There are great podcasts. You want to find those that speak to you, those that resonate with your style, those that fit your media consumption, but become an active consumer. Like, actually be curious about these things, be wondering, what is the next breakthrough, what is the next thing that might come out? And then you will learn. Admittedly, initially we all jump in and think this is pure magic and the world is about to flip upside down, but you live in it long enough and you start to hear the pragmatics of, yeah, we kind of all thought it was going to be this, turns out it's not really that, it's just this, but that's still really cool. And being along for that journey and watching that sort of evolution of thinking will build that fluency for you. The last point that I make, and this is again generalized advice regardless of your function, part of building that fluency is start from a place of curiosity. And I think this links in with some of what Ryan started with. I'm trying new tools every day. I use various AI tools every day, some for professional, some for personal stuff. And as I mentioned, I encourage my kids to do it. My wife is a nurse administrator. She uses AI in her job every day. So should be a thing where you're not afraid to jump in and tinker, even if things go wrong. Hold your own judgment, interpret the results as a human, but lean into the curiosity, which will put you in good stead, as Ryan said, to build new tools, add new tools to your toolkit, and continue to be out in front as new things emerge so that you don't end up falling behind.
Yeah. Taylor, over to you. Just from the people perspective, what are the kinds of tools that you personally are experimenting with, so that from the kind of the people and culture aspect help you maintain your personal skills, but also help upskilling your team?
Yeah, totally. My answer to this will probably be similar to the answers of a lot of knowledge workers today, right? We are transcribing meetings and using ChatGPT to help in so many ways, not just capturing notes, but for things like filling out scorecards more objectively and more quickly across our company, right? There's also like more built and packaged tools, like we're using Juicebox for AI and sourcing, which has been incredibly useful from an outbound perspective on the talent team. I think, we're using Claude and experimenting with all kinds of things that a lot of people are experimenting with today. But I think I did want to just contribute to that last question in terms of how professionals should think about this moment, which to me is more than anything about embracing change as a constant. I've said for a long time in terms of planning your career, especially if you want to work in startups, it's about thinking like a startup. And like Sean said, being curious, taking risks, being open to pivoting. But I think the biggest difference today, if you ask me for advice one-on-one to asking me 4 years ago, is 4 years ago, I might have said, pick the job that you ultimately want as like the endpoint of your career. Find a dozen profiles on LinkedIn and map back how their career progressed. And you'll find like different paths to the job you want, right? I think that's still a useful exercise, but today I can less promise you that you'll have similar paths to that same endpoint, because change is just happening so quickly. And I think right now my advice is probably be more open to non-traditional paths to growth. And so one example of that is I think we all can agree it's been a fairly tough job market for full-time openings. Um, but I've also seen pockets where it's actually a pretty great market for shorter term or contract work. The type of fractional freelance type engagement is something a lot of companies have leaned into because they're not sure if they need a long-term hire in this role, but they still need somebody to do it today, right? And so if that's not something you're exploring, that's potentially a door that you're leaving shut to get things done and show what you can do next year from what you got done last year, right? So that would be one point that I would make is just embrace change and think non-traditionally about the next step. And in terms of AI tools, I think Ryan and Sean are probably much more adept at which tools are out there. But on the people team side, it's ChatGPT, Granola for transcribing, Juicebox for sourcing, what have you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would bump Juicebox also as well, Taylor. We just deployed it 2 months ago, and I think, thinking about like how to make more efficiencies like at work, I think the idea of like, traditionally having to write like a Boolean string every morning on LinkedIn or like editing that like all the time, and now being able to use a tool like Juicebox or some other tool one day that comes out where I can say, I'm looking for a product manager who's worked at a company that's raised at least $50 million, that's under 100 employees, and every morning I wake up and there's 25 or 50 people that the agent just sent me, and I can say, okay, like now that human aspect can come in. I can wake up every morning and say, let me now take a look at what has been provided to me, and I can say, do I want to reach out to all these people? Do I not want to? Do I want to have the agent do it itself? Do I want to remain that engaged kind of early on in the process? And let me now pick out, but I wake up every morning with 25, 50 leads that would have taken me, who knows, depending on the role, like an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours to kind of really find some of those niche candidates. We're seeing some of those results and efficiencies right now for what we're doing day-to-day recruiting.
Yeah. And you all started out this whole session about, the value add of AI is reducing the mundane and allowing everybody to contribute their best. And so when you think about future-proofing your career, what does that actually mean? How do we think about either talking about it during an interview in terms of how you've leveraged AI, or thinking about it in terms of like, what do you need to learn next to be able to do that? I'll go over to Ryan, since you've done a huge endeavor and as an enablement person in learning development, being able to train the entire team on AI fundamentals, that's monumental and super important. But what would you say in terms of that starting point?
Yep. In terms of future proofing, there's kind of two buckets. There's like getting the job and then doing the job well once you got it. And on the doing the job side, I can tell you that at Whoop, we'll be pushing more and more into the domain of kind of show and tell, show us what you built, rather than applying with resumes. And so at the attraction side of things, like every employer wants people who can kind of plug in right away and get going. You won't get that with everyone. And the readiness piece that Sean mentioned earlier, like a willingness to learn tools if you don't already know them, is certainly at the forefront during the interview process. But I would encourage anyone who hasn't already built something that's visible and almost create like the same way a designer might have a design portfolio, having your own little AI portfolio of a feature, a prototype, an internal tool, a process, something to display that's visual, I think helps in a massive way in terms of just like getting the door open to stay open and get the interview. So that's like at the attraction stage. Most of the interviews that we're pushing on now for case studies are going to be more akin to something like person walks in the room, is handed a laptop, or if it's over Zoom, they'll be able to kind of have a little remote box to plug into where they'll have Cursor, Replit, ChatGPT, Gemini, N8N, everything. And the prompt will be like, build something of value in the next 30 minutes, and then let's talk about it for the remaining 30 minutes, right? So like that's where all of this is going. And I think the key point is just being ahead of that curve right now. So if you were looking for a job right now, or even if you might think like I may be going on the job market in 3 to 6 months from now, I'd be preparing for that moment. And last thing I'll say in this, which also kind of dovetails with once you actually get the job, and it's kind of back to my original point, is I'd strongly recommend just becoming a beast with one tool specifically. Like if you became a beast right now with whether it's Cursor, Replit, N8N, doesn't matter. There are everyone even in the chat right now is just sharing their kind of tool set kits that they have at their own companies. It's much easier, and all that stuff is public on LinkedIn everywhere, right? Like everyone's talking about what tool sets they're using. Become a beast with one of those tools, and then target companies that use those tool sets. And it's a pretty easy pitch to be able to walk in the door and say, like, I am highly, highly proficient with XYZ tool, Juicebox, right? It was just mentioned by Taylor and Bryan. I guarantee you if someone came off the street and said, like, I've been using Juicebox for the past 24 months and I'm a total killer with it, they're going to get the attention of somebody in the company on that team. So macro point here is I would back to that kind of tool belt concept. I would become a beast with one tool to start, and then I would start to conceptualize this idea of like a little AI portfolio, design portfolio that you can show and tell to other people and have a story around.
Yeah, I like that because especially for non-technical people, that portfolio can be content that you've created.
Totally.
So, for example, if I'm thinking about creating a leadership development program, maybe I use AI to blend the culture, the DNA together with a 360-degree evaluation. That's totally right within my lane. So for those that are not technical or looking for engineering jobs, don't worry. AI has really had a profound effect in all parts of the industries.
And Amy, if you don't mind if I chime in, kind of going off Ryan's point, I think something that as Ryan was talking about that also kind of had me thinking is like there's still this with AI, like I think it all goes back to still like even some of the problems we want to solve today as an engineer, a product manager, a talent professional, whatever it is. I think how do you use AI or whatever people were using 15, 20 years ago in their different roles. I think still like how to be someone who is solving problems of value. So, thinking about like in your function, what are the processes? Like you might not have to recreate the wheel and find new use cases in your job, like, but how do you use AI to actually figure out like what are the processes that we can become more efficient with today? So I think like sometimes a lot of people think about like, hey, I have to totally recreate the wheel with some new like with AI and create something new that no one's seen before, where that not like isn't necessarily like the case all the time unless you're trying to start a new company. Like some of it's like, hey, I'm a talent acquisition professional, here are the things I struggle with today for my team, and how can I figure out creating a tool to become more efficient, or leverage a tool that exists and make my team more efficient. And I think that problem solving, like that soft skill of being someone who can figure out where the value is still going to be really important, no matter what happens with all the different tools that come out.
That's fantastic. And Ron mentioned you don't have to be a programmer to create AI things. And I think that's for people that might be the misconception that I have to be super uber technical. But when a friend of mine came out to me and said, "Oh, I created an AI agent," I'm like, "You did what?" You don't even know how to turn your computer on. So, taking the fear out of it and thinking about how you can solve problems of value. I love that phrase. And finding one problem in your life and your work, whatever that might be, and just go attack it. And I love that Sean said one tool, become an expert, or whoever said it, because it can be really overwhelming. Switching to that, I think there is sometimes some concern that AI might take over some jobs or people's livelihood. I think people still have to make those connections, but that was really important. What are some of those other soft skills that now need to come up in practice with the advent of AI, replacing some of those mundane or kind of slog types of tasks that people might have to can relinquish? How about Bryan? You look for talent all the time. So with that, are you looking for any kind of new soft skills or people that are leaning into AI, and what soft skills should they be presenting?
Yeah, I think for us with how AI is just like evolving and how like the field is just evolving in general, I think for us, one of the things we look at, I'd say really heavily at Kensho for any role, is really about like how adaptable you are. And that kind of adaptability piece, like technology's changing, how jobs are going to be done. Everything is going to change in the next, 3 to 5+ years, whatever it may be. So someone that can come in and say, hey, like I can be adaptable. I've done this, and then, I can pivot to this. Or do, like, hey, I worked in computer vision, but I know that like everything's going towards LLMs. Like I really want to dive into NLP, and these are some of the things I've learned on the side, and that I've started to explore. That's really, I think, what we ultimately want to see from people, because everything is just changing so rapidly. If you're just like, I do this one thing, that one thing could be made obsolete via, some sort of tool 6 months from now, 10 months from now. We could be working on a project at Kensho, that we think is of super high value. And then in, 12 months, OpenAI might say, roll out something, and we're like, oh crap, like, well, we have to toss this project away. Like they've already solved this problem for us. You know, our parent company doesn't want it. No customer is going to want it. Scrap it. We have to move into something else. Like time to learn something new. And I think having that mindset of like, I can just jump into anything, and I want to jump into anything because I want to learn, that is really what's critical for us.
Yeah.
Can I add, Amy?
Of course.
I think the most important soft skill in this next era is, I mean, full plus one to adaptability, of course, but I think it's taste. If the two measures of the value of your work are speed and quality, AI brings the speed, and you have to bring the quality, right? What's your perspective on what is exceptional? Sure, we made this in 30 minutes, but is it good? And why is it good? And if it's not good, what needs to change in our prompt to make it good, right? And so I think I've definitely seen here at January, it's something we look for, but I've definitely seen this as a trend in dinners I'm attending, and something that's how do we measure taste in an interview process, and how do we really know if somebody's opinion about what exceptional is meets ours? And so it's something for everyone to, I think, really think about. We can work faster now, but can we do it better? And that will be more and more important.
Yep. Faster doesn't always equal better. Sean, as you're coaching executives and people, what are the questions that they're coming to for you in terms of kind of future-proofing their career? What is on people's minds, and then what coaching advice do you give to them?
Yeah. I don't know whether this will be generally applicable, but let me offer something that may at least spark some reactions. One of the biggest things that I hear from coaching clients and other executives is that they are getting very confusing messages from their senior leadership. I was coaching somebody literally yesterday whose CEO has decided that ChatGPT is the oracle of all brilliant insights in their business, and every couple days comes with some new thing that ChatGPT told him was the most important thing to do, and maybe a little to Taylor's point, like very little quality control and what's coming out of that. He's just sort of bringing that to the table. I've seen other organizations, and I saw some comments in the chat where folks have sort of lost control, and their individual team members are using all kinds of tools and potentially putting the company at risk. And they're trying to figure out, how do I not squash the enthusiasm? How do I not, hurt the productivity gains, but still rapidly iterate towards more acceptable terms of use and tool approval, et cetera? So a lot of it is around the meta management of AI enablement inside of organizations. I think those are the primary challenges that come up. But let me sort of link that back a little to what both Taylor and Bryan said. And an additional skill, or at least it isn't that you need to build this as your domain of strength, but you should be aware of to what degree you understand the systems and processes of completing your work. So to Bryan's point of like, choose a part of your workflow and understand where you can add real value there by using new tools and new technologies. I think that's true in every function. I think the ability to articulate, I mean, even just as a like very low bar, take home activity for all of us, is go sit down for 30 minutes with a piece of paper and a pencil, like old school, and write down all of the steps in completing some really important task that you do on a regular basis. And then look at each of those steps and ask yourself, could I use AI or new technologies, new emerging tools to improve, accelerate, optimize. And there've been good examples here. So some talk around screening resumes, around understanding how to screen candidates more effectively. That's part of your workflow, but understanding the larger workflow. And the reason I mention all of that to this kind of systems thinking is folks who are very good at sort of structure only, but don't kind of understand the linkage of activities, I find are struggling to understand where AI can really make a big impact. While those that think in terms of sequential steps and all the interactions of those things, not only can quickly identify, oh, if we could drop AI in here, we could make this much faster, but they immediately recognize all of the ripple effects that happen. So a concrete example I'll give you, because part of a product development organization is, a year and a half, 2 years ago, generative AI made it easy for product managers to generate massive volumes of requirements documents. And that seemed cool. It was great, saving time writing requirements, right? But all you did was then immediately pass the burden on to engineers and designers who couldn't keep up with hundreds and hundreds of pages of documents that were being generated. So the next step in the workflow was, well, let's use some LLMs to distill that down to its core elements. Great. Now the question is, like, how am I going to code all this stuff? Well, great. Generative AI and code assist tools made that much easier. So now I can generate a lot of code faster. But wait, now I've got this huge backlog of pull requests and nobody to test all of this. And so now you start looking at tools. So understanding that in some ways we're moving inefficiencies around and being able to think of the whole system and attack where the greatest inefficiencies are first will create a much, much better outcome, back to Bryan's original point.
That's really important. And I don't think that I've heard that perspective at the forefront, because AI can actually, we look at it as something that can contribute great things, but it can also, if not approached with that systems thinking and that system design, you could go down a rat hole really quickly. Have any of you ever gone down that rat hole really quickly and then had to back out? And it's really tough. It's very tough. So having that idea. So we've heard critical thinking as a really important skill, systems thinking, approachable, adaptable, curious. All of these are really important skills to be able to bring forward. I don't think that you can immediately just become curious. So that idea of future-proofing your career, pick one of those. Like we were talking about one tool. You can't suddenly become systems design thinking and then be curious and then try to do all of these at one time. It's a step in that direction. So when I'm thinking about that job description, what AI is showing up so much in job descriptions as a requirement. How can candidates talk about their own AI skills when they're just, this is probably for Bryan, candidates in the sourcing process? What are you looking for in terms of skills or experiences, or how should somebody in that candidate process talk about their AI experience before they even get to talk to a human?
Yeah, I think, the idea of that AI portfolio, Ryan, I really like that. I hadn't really thought too much about that, but I do love that idea of people really kind of bringing that as almost like separate or, in conjunction with a resume to the table. I think from, what we're looking for and going through different job descriptions, I think for me, personally, and obviously it can change company to company, but a company's not always necessarily looking for everything that's on a list in a job description, but we want to see, again, like, are you adaptable? Have you shown that you've progressed in, your learnings? And, have you taken, I think even listing out, like, I think at this point, given all the tools that are out there, like, someone should have shown some curiosity into some sort of AI tool. So even if you say, like, became power user of, our internal generative AI platform. So like at S&P Global and Kensho, we have an internal platform called Spark Assist that we rolled out across the entire enterprise. That is a widely available tool for anyone at S&P Global to use if you're an employee. So to me, that would be like, if you work at S&P Global and I was interviewing you, you should have used Spark Assist for something, for HR to build job, something is, mundane as building job descriptions. So really, like, how can you just show that you've at least tried to do something with AI within like one or two tasks, I think would be really important to see. You don't need to be an expert, as we've all said, like, we're just so early on in this, like, that curiosity, that adaptability is really what we want to see, as we get talking to you in the interview process.
That's excellent because that signaling AI readiness and even being open to it, I think is really important. And in the field that I'm coming from, we're kind of lagging a little bit behind in terms of talent management and learning and development. And so I went to a seminar the other day, and it was just amazing how many tools are out there. So if you are thinking about qualifying a tool for your work, that one tool, Sean, I'll go back to you. Like, how do you go? There are so many tools out there, and you could rattle them off. How do you pick your tool?
Well, I think you threw it to me, though. That was Ryan's insight of kind of finding a
Right.
tool that
Sorry.
you
Yeah.
want to go deep on. But
Yeah.
I'll just say, and then
Yes.
Ryan, feel free to take the mic. But obviously, I'm coming from the perspective predominantly of leading engineering organizations. So if I'm thinking about candidates there, it's the real obvious starting point is a code assist tool. That's a place where you need to be really efficient and where you get the highest leverage. Back to Brian's point of like, where can I really show that I attacked the hardest part of the problem? Still applying all of my larger technical, architectural, strategic systems thinking, but like right there, I can save myself a ton of time if I understand how to craft good prompts, get good outputs from that. I think for different functions, it's going to be a different tool, and maybe Ryan, having kind of looked more broadly across the whole org, might have some other suggestions.
Yeah, thanks, Sean. The where my head goes is like there's kind of like personal and professional. So like anytime we interview someone internally here, one of the first companies we ask them is like, what are the tools that are available right now at your current company? And you get the hodgepodge, right? Like some companies are using everything and everything's unlocked. Some companies like just turned ChatGPT on last month or may not even. And so for when we're interviewing someone and there is kind of like this blocked castle around their current work environment, the immediate questions go to in like a compliant way, talking to them about what they built outside of work in their personal life. Like if you're not using any sort of tool set in your personal life, and that's like your life, the odds of you really enjoying building with AI at work is like zero. And so the focus will go there. Internally, one thing we do here at Whoop that I think was smart, and I'd encourage other companies to do the same thing, is we made this little personal beta program where you can test any tool, even if it's not approved by our GRC within the four walls of Whoop, on your own, at home, on a personal laptop, and get reimbursed for it. And so my macro point when we started this whole department in November was like, I don't want anyone to ever feel like they can't use a tool, that a tool is blocked for whatever reason. And it may be blocked at Whoop, right? Like for GRC purposes, or maybe we're working through it in the funnel and, checking the boxes, crossing the T's, dotting the I's, all that. But outside of work, we should be willing to reimburse you at least for 1 to 2 months of testing a tool with the ask of come back to us with a recommendation. And the recommendation is pretty straightforward. It's a one pager around like, do you recommend this tool or not? If so, why? What teams do you think would benefit from this tool? We obviously talk budget and try to put together a little pilot program of 1 to 10 licenses internally first. And what does a rollout strategy look like if the tool, beta tool internally were to go well? And so the toolkits themselves, like obviously, like every domain has their own like 3 to 5 tool sets that they kind of stamp and say, we're going to approve these and add to the tool belt. But even before that, I would strongly encourage any person here whose company is tighter to the vest with approving tools to take a look at something like a personal beta program and just unleash everybody, right? Because like if you're not using these tools at work and you're not using them at home, you're just going to fall super far behind. So yeah, that'd be my advice on that front.
I'd also say to the job speakers on the call, the job seekers on the call, don't get too hung up on the meaning of deep expertise on this subject. And I say that because the proliferation of use of these tools in the workplace is so exceptionally new. It's really within the last 12 months, to Ryan's point. Some companies are still blocking use of these tools, right? And the reality is the person who wrote the job description you're looking at probably doesn't have deep expertise themselves, and they probably used AI to write this job description, right? And so I love Ryan's suggestion of building a portfolio of how you're tinkering with it, how you're thinking about it, and ideas that you have to link in your resume. But even just consider sharing what you're seeking, because if you're looking to dive into AI and that's what you want in your next team, that's going to sound appealing to a lot of teams that are looking for people who are excited about this. And that's something you can put on your resume that doesn't necessarily mean deep expertise, but could make you stand out, right? Um, so that's just some advice
And
I'd give the job descriptions.
maybe to add on to that, I think going back to Taylor, what you're saying and what I was saying in the beginning, like for like the AI readiness on like a resume and just an interview, like just be transparent with kind of where you're at. As Keith just said in the chat, we're all figuring this out together. Even before, besides just AI, like, we've all interviewed Sean. I'm sure you've interviewed many of engineers in your career. If you write on your resume deep expertise in X, Y, and Z, if Sean sees a resume and says deep expertise in Python, and then you're like, you go into like a simple like syntax, and then you're like, I don't really know what this is. I actually just kind of wrote it. Like that, that looks worse than saying like, and I try to tell candidates all the time, and I think it's candidates don't necessarily want to be caught in saying like I don't know something, but I don't know is better than trying to fake it with an expert in the field. And I think that's really important to keep in mind. Like, as Taylor said, not everyone's an expert in AI now. It's very early. Like, be transparent with what you know and what you're eager to learn. Don't try to like write too much on your resume that you're not going to be able to actually answer for in the interview, because whatever you put on your resume ultimately becomes fair game in an interview, so you have to be ready to answer those questions.
Yeah, and I would just connect the dots for anybody in the audience that is a job seeker to sort of put together two different things you've heard in this session. I think Bryan makes a great point of being very clear about where you're at. But the flip side is we've all acknowledged that even in our own orgs, and presumably we are, some of the folks on the bleeding edge of this, we're all still experimenting too. So I can give you a concrete example of what Bryan was talking about. I interviewed somebody just 2 days ago. He has been between jobs, and so he's had a little bit of downtime. In his prior work, he had done nothing whatsoever with AI. The company wasn't invested there. He's used the last 2 months just to tinker on the side, and he was very self-effacing about these are just little tinker side projects. I'm just playing around with stuff at home, kind of my own thing. Haven't put anything into production. I'm not saying it's, I'm a guru, but I'm also not at zero. I took the time to tinker and play and try things. And this may not be true. I've been in some other AI panels recently, and I usually start with the disclaimer of like, whatever I say today will probably be outdated in 3 months because things are moving very, very quickly. So, tolerances for all of us in that regard. And this may not be true in 6 months or 12 months, where companies may be expecting a little more like proof points along the way and real AI utilization in production. But right now, we're living in a moment where I think you will find hiring managers very tolerant of, I'm in the toy stage. I'm still playing around, but I'm learning a lot. Here's what I found interesting. Here's what I've discovered. I think that would be perceived at a much higher level than your worry may lead you to believe.
Yeah.
Great advice. Yeah.
I hope that clarifies it for those job seekers who are, a little nervous about that. We've got a couple of minutes to wrap up, and I'd love to ask a couple of things. We've talked a lot about tooling. We've talked a lot about those soft skills, but if you were to go back, what would you tell your pre-AI self about preparing for this era? Because I don't think anybody saw it coming. If you could go back and say, hey, Taylor, this is your future self talking to you.
Yeah, I think past Taylor um, thought similarly to a lot of people in that um, when ChatGPT first came out, I like tried it once and I was like, oh, this output is garbage. Like my output is better than this. And I didn't really touch it again for months. And I think earlier on, I shouldn't have been asking like, is ChatGPT good or not? I should have been asking, am I prompting correctly? Like, what do I not know? And how am I approaching this incorrectly, right? I think I would have learned sooner and faster where it actually can specifically add value for me. Um, and I think that's a really important um, point of view to take going forward, right? Not just for me, but for everyone. If the output is bad, um, ask yourself, how are you using it? And what different ways can we use it to try to get a different outcome?
Yeah, that's great.
I actually, in some ways, kind of cheated by forecasting exactly my answer to this question, which is I would encourage myself to be more curious, to tinker with more things and try more things. The reason I'm evangelizing that mindset now is while I'm largely an optimist when it comes to emerging trends that are going to change everything, I tend to be a bit of a skeptic because I've been through enough hype cycles that I go, yeah, I mean, every new technology is presumably going to change everything, except 99 out of 100 really don't. And I would say I have quickly become much more of a believer. And I think there's a lot of bracketing around that outcome and what that ends up looking like. But I think, in some ways, I've been tinkering. I was on the board of a company that was an AI first company 9, 10 years ago. But what I didn't really see was the inflection point that was going to come with publicly available large models. And if I had kind of stayed curious and been a little bit closer to it and not kind of written off some of the early experiences that I've had, I think I would have been in an even stronger position at this point.
Yeah, great.
Uh, I'll go, yeah, to that. I'd say, just thinking about this, like, just because you're an expert, I would tell myself, just because you think you're an expert now does not mean you're going to be the expert in a year or 5 years or 10 years from now. I think as Taylor said, right, like ChatGPT came out, I played with it a couple times, and then I was like, yeah, like we'll see what kind of progresses. And honestly, like, hand up, like I still feel like I am personally still kind of catching up, because like I just didn't dive in like head first when some of this stuff started coming out. So even myself today, like I find myself trying to play catch up. I see some people in the chat that I think I'm probably connected with on LinkedIn. Like, I follow their content. Like, I want to see what other people are posting about. And like, I'm trying to myself try to figure out like how are the best ways I can actually leverage this for my team. So I think for me, I would have told myself like, and even today, like, cool, you lead a recruiting team. Are you going to be able to do that in 5 years if you like keep with the status quo? And the answer is going to be probably not. So how can I make sure I adapt myself to where the future of the industry is going?
Yeah, that's great.
On my end, I would have told myself to buy NVIDIA stock. That would be number one. And then number two is I would have just forced myself to post publicly about things I'm building. I feel like the HubSpot founders do a great job with this. There's others in town that anytime that they're tinkering and getting something off the ground from 0 to 1, they're posting publicly. And that kind of does two things. One is it like forces you to learn and get better at what you're building, but two, it's a huge magnet for talent. And right now, I'm just happiest when I'm around other builders and people who are tinkering as well, and whether that's playing with ChatGPT or launching a prototype. And so right now, I think there's a race. There's clearly a race right now to gobble up as much of the great AI forward talent as humanly possible. And I feel like I was early to that, but I probably would have been more public about posting things I'm building to just gather that crew around me at an earlier stage.
Yeah, great. So when you're thinking about that, how do you connect to other like-minded people? Who are your go-to communities that you're gravitating towards to either learn or to, outside of VentureFizz? We'll let Keith do a big plug at the end, but to build knowledge takes a community, because curiosity comes from many different places. So Bryan, like, who do you hang out with and learn from? And is it a local community? Is it a podcast? People are asking for kind of more specific examples because they're...
Yep. Yeah, good question. I mean, I've known Keith for 20 years. Keith, and I love what VentureFizz has done for probably even more than 20 years I've known him. And outside of that, and I mean, Keith talk regularly because I want to always know what's on top of his brain in this subject. My biggest recommendation to anyone is just build in public, go and find a friend, build together. You either know more than them, which means you can help them, or they know more than you, which means that they can help you. We do this at Whoop every Friday from right after our Friday lunch team meeting from 1 to 3. I literally sit up on the 8th floor and just put up on a screen, whether it's Replit or Cursor or something, and build a prototype, encouraging people to also come up there and build with me. I hold vibe nights where we all just get together and throw out a prompt and everyone builds the same thing. And then we share what we got, kind of like a paint night type of vibe. So my point there would just be like, if the community out there, if you haven't found a community that's great for you, I would just start one with a buddy and get going on it together. Because I think we just need more of it everywhere. So
I like that paint night, prompt night. That could be really interesting.
It's been fun. We've done a handful of them.
How about you, Sean? Who are you hanging out with? Who are you listening to?
Yeah, I literally was asked this question in a Slack community just the other day, and I wrote up a pretty long response, but I'll try to keep it brief here so everybody has a chance to answer. Um, One, I'm very fortunate because I am in the tech community specifically, and having been an engineer and an engineering executive for a long time, my LinkedIn feed is predominantly AI forward founders and engineers. And so I can look at LinkedIn in any moment and get inspiration, ideas, see what people are doing. As Ryan says, the people who are working in public and talking about what they're doing. So that's a bit of leverage. I wouldn't be afraid to follow folks that you know are sharing good content on these communities, whether LinkedIn or some other network is the right place for you. I mentioned earlier there are some really good subreddits. I like actually some of the non-work oriented ones. Just there's some interesting communities talking about interesting prompts they've created for ChatGPT to really do some mind-blowing things. And you don't have to do exactly what they're doing, but it sort of sparks interesting ideas and inspiration for you of new ways you can think about leveraging these tools. Um, I'm very much in Ryan's category of, I like to talk publicly about what I'm doing. And I think of it as gravity. You sort of create a gravitational force that pulls the right people towards you. I love the idea and have created a lot of communities. So I would say look for communities. I have a group of engineering leadership executives that I meet with once a month. We just put an hour Zoom call on the calendar once a month. It's a standing meeting. And not surprisingly, but also not formally, 80% of the agenda is AI. Whether we want it to be or we write it down or not, we just talk about AI tools, how we're measuring outcomes, new technologies we're using, ways in which we're sort of combating what's going on across the rest of our enterprise. So finding a community of people who are equally passionate and enthusiastic and making sure that you join those conversations.
Perfect. Taylor, any parting thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I'm super lucky when it comes to learning and improving on AI. My first community is right here at January, and I value that so much. But I'm also part of a few people leader groups, and I get a tremendous amount of value from that. I think really, no matter what your job is, no matter what you do, there's groups for networking and communing. And I think on the topic of future-proofing your career, it's beyond just learning together, but it's the most important thing. Who's going to refer you to the next job? It doesn't have to be somebody you worked directly next to. It could be somebody that, like Ryan said, you just built something with for fun because you met them at a networking event, right? So I think the importance of every job you have, collecting friends and people who you've worked with, but also just going out and proactively meeting people at networking events related to your field. What's the worst that could happen? You'll get a free snack, maybe a even if you don't meet somebody you vibe with there, but just do it. I think sometimes people are hesitant, especially after the pandemic when we all just got so used to being in our shells, you know.
And Bryan, anybody different that you would mention?
I don't think so. I think, as everyone said, I think like as Sean said, like my LinkedIn feed, I think is full of people that are posting a lot about, I created this prompt for something I'm trying to solve in talent acquisition, or, I'm using these tools. What's your toolkit? The professional networking groups, especially local in your area, I think are all really great. There's, I'm sure, thousands of them out there, depending on what city you're in and just in general. I don't think anything else to add on that point.
Great.
Cool. Well, I think we're at time, Amy. So, amazing job, Amy, moderating the panel. And everybody, Ryan, Sean, Taylor, Bryan, thank you so much for sharing all these great insights because people are all figuring this out. And I learned a ton. And I think it's good to see how like Whoop is just leaning into AI and all the programs you have. Like Ryan, when you were talking about how you're allowing employees to experiment, outside of work and still pay for the subscription. Like there was just, chat. People like, that's a great idea. That's a great idea. So I think other companies need to be following a similar type of process. So as I mentioned, this is the fifth and final event of this AI Career Level Up series. It's been an amazing 5 weeks. I plan on doing more events, like just not with a combined theme of 5 together. So if you guys ever have any suggestions on topics that you'd like VentureFizz to cover, please, send me a message on LinkedIn or send me an email, Keith@VentureFizz. Happy to address those. But we will publish the video from today in 2 weeks. The video from last week's event will be up next week. The third week, I mean, the third event was today, so it's been like staggered every 2 weeks or so. But thank you, panel, for all of everything that you contributed here. Appreciate it. Very grateful. And thank you to Aura for sponsoring this amazing podcast. Event series. It has been a phenomenal partnership. And Amy, thanks again for moderating.
Sure, thank you.
All right, guys, we'll
Thanks,
sign
Sean.
off.
Thanks,
Enjoy the
everyone.
rest of the summer.
Thank you.